turn our attention now to the 2019 matrics. Results are out and prospective students are now weighing their options, looking at which courses to study and where. Distance learning is one option, but what are the advantages and disadvantages? Unisa Professor Lindelani Mnguni joins us now to look at this more closely. Thank you very much for your time this morning. So we know that the demand for placement is far greater, or there are lots of students looking for placement. Many of them won't necessarily be guaranteed places at traditional tertiary institutions like universities or varsity colleges. Is distance learning an option that enough people look into, or is there a drive to encourage people to investigate this more closely?
I think over the past few years there has been an increased need and demand for distance education, primarily because it provides opportunities to students who cannot be on campus or who cannot afford accommodation and the like. So other universities besides the University of South Africa, for example, are now exploring options of introducing programs through distance education. So it is indeed growing, and it is one of the best options that I would recommend for students.
Okay, so we're talking about the disadvantages and the advantages. What are some of, you've mentioned finances being one of the benefits, that you don't have to pay for accommodation. What are some of the other pros about studying through distance learning?
I think one of the biggest advantage is the fact that even if you are studying, say, through Unisa, you are able to be working at the same time. So you do not need to be on campus and attending lectures. So you can be doing some other thing on the side, say you are working or you're running your small business, and still be able to study. So it is flexible in the sense that there are no specific timetables that you have to follow. But also you are able to study anywhere in the world. You can be abroad, you can be locally, or in any other space that you want to be. I think the other very important issue is that when you attend on campus, you have to pay for accommodation. But with distance education, you can be staying at home and still be able to attend at university and study and get your qualification.
So in the same breath as that we are directing this conversation specifically at 2019 matriculants who now looking for placements, distance learning also opens up the field to older students who perhaps did not study directly after matric, maybe went to work, became parents. Is that another category of people who benefit largely from distance learning?
Precisely. I think it's important also to mention that when it comes to tertiary education, there is no age limit. You can study at any age. I remember last year there was, I think, a 90-year-old who graduated through Unisa, so there is no age limit. One of the other advantages is that because you are studying through distance learning, then you can study any program at any time that you want to register for. But what we are seeing as well at the moment is that more and more younger learners from matric are registering for distance education, precisely because there is more space in such institutions. If you consider that Unisa, for instance, has about 300,000 students per annum that are registered there. So that means it's able to accommodate a little bit more students than a contact university. So I think in that sense it's also an advantage for more students.
So when we're speaking about very young or just matriculated learners, we know that distance learning requires some discipline in terms of making sure that in your own time and without direct and regular encouragement from a lecturer, for instance, that you need to fulfill the mandate and the assignments, do the testing regularly enough. Is that one of the disadvantages? Do younger learners find it more difficult, or is that very personal?
I think it's an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. It's an advantage in the sense that the skills you learn, such as self-discipline, self-directed learning, benefit you in the long term, because you don't need anybody to tell you, for instance, that you need to go to work now because you learn that skill through distance education. However, if you do not develop that skill, it can be a problem, because there is nobody who's going to remind you, for instance, that you now need to submit an assignment or you need to attend. So as a consequence, a lot of students tend to fall behind and graduate a little bit later than contact students. Because of self-discipline and self-directed learning, but also because no one is there in your home to help you with your programs. You are on your own, and you have to develop self-discipline quite strongly so that you can be able to graduate.
Staying on that issue, if a student were to have specific problems with course material, is there another way of contacting lecturers to resolve those issues?
So universities that offer this option, what they do is there are multiple ways of contacting the university. There are e-tutors, tutors through the internet. There are lecturers as well. You can call them, you can email them, but also you can visit them. For instance, at Unisa, we've got regional centers around the country, in all different provinces. In the College of Education, for example, they've got teacher centers where you can walk in at any time and access the material. So it's possible to contact contact the lecturers. It doesn't mean because they are not there physically, then you cannot contact them. You just need to utilize the different options that are available to you for contacting them. I must also mention that a lot of students wait for printed study material in order to start their studies, whereas you can log onto the system or whichever university you're in and access the study material and be able to process. So you don't have to wait for the mailbox to come through with the study material. You can start working using the or e-learning resources.
Oh, and of course that's part of what makes distance learning so accessible, is that access to technology, to information, and the drive to make people proactive in accessing education on their own terms and not necessarily as in parrot fashion in sort of traditional contact learning. But thank you very much for that, Professor, for your time. We've been speaking to Professor Lindelani Mnguni from Unisa.